Welcome to the Wool Consulting Group course overview of ICH GCP E6 Good Clinical Practices. My name is Liz Wool and I am your trainer today. I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. I started out as a research nurse at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. I have 25 years plus experience in clinical research with experience in clinical operations, training design and delivery, training strategies and infrastructure, trial management, quality, compliance, CRO, supplier vendor management, as well as procedural documents and process mapping and quality management systems. Every year, I present at approximately 7 to 9 international conferences on these topics, and this is where I learn a great deal about current issues, trends, regulatory inspection findings, and solutions that I bring to the Wool Consulting Group clients, as well as here in our training courses. I have been a certified CRA since 2000 from the Association of Clinical Research Professionals, ACRP, and the recertification requirements are that I maintain continuing education requirements that ensure that I am current in clinical research to maintain that certification. I had the distinct honor to be an invited thought leader speaker at the Beyond Basic GCP Training NIH CTSA meeting a number of years ago, whereby they were determining what the GCP training requirements needed to be for clinical researchers. I am also a distinguished author in training and quality management systems for the ACRP Monitor Clinical Researcher Journal, and I have worked with biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies, CROs, academic health centers, the National Institutes of Health, and university research administrator training programs. The agenda for this course is as follows. We're going to review the learning objectives, key definitions, provide you with an overview of clinical research. We're also going to provide you with an overview of GCP, what are its key components. Clinical research ethical principles will also be reviewed because this is the foundation of executing human subject protections, taking care of our subjects in the clinical trial, as well as the integrity of the research that is conducted. We are going to review investigator institution requirements. That is followed by the Institutional Review Board, also known as the Independent Ethics Committee's requirements, a high-level overview, sponsor requirements, essential documents, and then we're going to provide you with a course summary. Let us review the learning objectives. After this course, you will be able to describe the general principles governing clinical research so that you will understand what these requirements are when you implement and execute your clinical trials. Identify the 3 responsibilities of the sponsor so that you know what your responsibilities are as a sponsor. Identify the 3 responsibilities for investigators conducting the clinical study. It is very important to sponsor organizations to understand what those requirements are because we are responsible for the oversight of the investigator's performance and compliance with GCP, the protocol, and study-related procedures. And then we are going to make sure you can describe the role of the IRB and Ethics Committee in the conduct of clinical trials, so that you will understand how to perform oversight of either commercial IRBs, central IRBs, as well as ensuring your investigator local IRBs are actually performing their requirements of annual review, etc., during the clinical trial. Good clinical practice is the gold standard guideline and regulation governing research on an international basis. Further, in clinical research, all of these requirements apply. When you are working with computerized systems, electronic systems, you have very specific requirements in ICH GCP E6 GCP for computerized systems validation, data quality and integrity and reliability, and then Foundational principles include the GCP we're going through today, human subject protection that we're going through today, and the applicable privacy laws. In the European Union, it's GDPR. In the US, it's called HIPAA. And if you've ever been to a doctor's office or a dentist's office, you have signed that form in order to have your information shared with other doctors or with your insurance companies. So very important to understand all of these are foundations of clinical research conduct by all stakeholders. Let's do another knowledge check. Non-clinical and clinical information on the investigational product needs to be adequate to support the proposed clinical trial, meaning that you have to have information and evidence that says you can actually proceed with the clinical trial. Is that A, true, or B, false? Well, you're right. It is true. This is a requirement. Remember, the document where we are gathering this information is called the investigator's brochure, but also information in the protocol as well can be reviewed by the site and the IRB Ethics Committee. As discussed earlier in this course, and I hope you've been able to review the video that I mentioned earlier, the Nuremberg Code that was established at the Nuremberg trials during World War II War Crime Tribunal is a predicate reference for the ICH principles. ICH principles outline the foundational thinking for the designing, planning, conducting, auditing, recording, and reporting of a study. Specific attention is paid to computerized systems validation, good clinical practices, human subject protection, applicable privacy laws by country, region, or state, and data integrity and reliability. Now, when we are coming to what type of reports the investigator has to generate, let's first look at what we call a progress report. This can be a progress report about the study, the status of the subjects, number enrolled, number completed, number who have passed away, number who are active in the study or not, number recruiting, how many subjects have we screened and recruited, to the institution for their own research practice requirements, their IRB and Ethics Committee, and they have to give the IRB and Ethics Committee an update according to what they want for that study, at least annually or per their own instructions. They also have to include reports to the sponsor, IRB and Ethics Committee, and regulatory authority of any changes significantly affecting the conduct of the trial and or increasing risk to the trial subjects. So they have to submit a written report to all these individuals when it's required, and they get that direction from the sponsor and the IRB and Ethics Committee, and when they need to also inform the regulatory authority. And then the adverse events, as we talked to you about, they have serious adverse events, laboratory abnormalities, identification and description of these events, different medical information that comes to them, and relationship to the IP, the causality determination, and everything they record in the case report forms. So these are all the documents that they have to retain and maintain regarding adverse events. Very important because they have to maintain it, and then they have to put it into the case report forms that goes into the clinical database for analysis by the sponsor. Now, for the serious adverse events, again, this is going to be coming in from the subject record as well as some reporting records, the identification, description, the medical information that is used in that report, the relationship, causality of the event to the IP, and remembering that strict reporting timelines are followed for serious adverse events, and then they also include this information in the case report forms. And it's very important that you recognize everything regarding safety, adverse events is very tightly controlled and tracked at the investigator site and inside of the sponsor. Subject deaths, in the event that might happen, a subset of a serious adverse event, as we talked about earlier, they are going to be asked to provide an autopsy report. They're going to be asked to be provided with the final medical records that includes the discharge summary. And again, because of the fact that they need to have strict reporting timelines for follow-up on these serious adverse events, or at least keep the regulatory authority informed that they're not going to have an autopsy report for another 2 months, and they'll send that in as well. So we have to maintain that close communication about what the final autopsy showed, because we not only have to report that to the regulatory authorities, but we have to put that into our clinical database so that we can track the reasons for subject death and evaluate this according to whether it could be related to the study drug or not, the investigational product. And of course, they always record everything in the case report form that goes in the clinical database. And then at the end of the trial, they complete a report as well. And this is called the final report. This could be a summary of the trial's outcome at the site, inform the institution, IRB ethics committee, and the sponsor according to their reporting requirements and standards. And the sponsor will ask them specific information that they would need in their report as well. In summary, this course has reviewed for you that the research subject's rights, safety, and welfare are the most important, the most paramount aspect of clinical research and human subject protection, and is a critical element of those foundational ethical principles we discussed. The system of shared responsibilities is designed to support and ensure human subject protection, reliability of trial results, and quality of the clinical trial and quality of the data. Good clinical practices are a global standard and a requirement for all clinical trials. And remember what we discussed at the beginning of this course from John Rutan. If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?